another episode of the Young Turks podcast. Ahmed Gafir and Mason Viner. Ahmed, let's start off with the hot news. Right before the Terps bowl drops, Sean Barham hits the portal. Big loss for the Terps.
Yeah, there were some rumblings these last couple of days. Felt like really from Thursday on, rumors and just portal tampering, NIL, all that stuff really just seemed to get a lot louder. Just try to figure out, what's kind of true and what's separate, and what guys are kind of on the fence, and just try and go from there. But yeah, I mean, there were definitely some rumors. I had a subscriber ask me Saturday, any update on Jay Sean? I just said, TBD, and because at that point it was TBD. I mentioned Oregon, obviously a school that's kind of been rumored for him, but sounded like yesterday wasn't even 100% that he was going to go in. So, like you mentioned, obviously this is it's a huge loss for the defense, but unfortunately, it is just the latest loss for Maryland.
Yeah, it is. Earlier during the weekend, we heard that Corey Dyches, who Maryland, in all fairness here, they celebrated his senior day. There was NFL talk around him. There was portal talk around him. There was staying talk around him. He also announced that he will hit the transfer portal.
Yeah, that was another one, obviously, kind of, similar to Jay Sean, where, just in the NIL era, obviously with Digest, finishing the season, regular season, fourth among all tight ends and catches with 49 this year. Sounds like, the Big 12 suitors could kind of be in the mix there for Colorado, with Shedeur Sanders, going to a school with an established quarterback in place. Sounds like that's something, a preference for Digest, but, again, it just goes back to really similar reasons for Barham. Just the free agency, the modern era of college football, just ended up fighting Maryland there.
Yeah, it definitely has. And look, it's out there. Ahmed, you mentioned it, the tampering, the agency, the free agency side of it, the I guess camps, as they've always been referred to in college sports, mainly college basketball, have definitely taken over college football. And Terps, not the only Power Five team to lose big name players. It is just constant movement at this point. And Maryland also, they're going to jump in that and get involved with guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, so like I'll like be blunt. I mean, it's like free agency. Like, there's no. I'll share one story. I heard one player that was getting talked to behind the scenes. There was another player on the same team who found out. Those said coaches who were tampering with player A reached out to player B and said, "Hey, if you're interested, you come along too." Like, it's as easy as that. Like, it's just kind of like throughout. Obviously, Digest, Barham, those are huge names, and especially a guy like Barham, when you looked at, just former four-star from DeMatha, St. Francis, and Maryland was able to keep him home. Obviously, prime away first from Penn State, then South Carolina, and to watch him depart 2 years later obviously stings. But there are guys that are really choosing to stay at Maryland, turn down other opportunities because they want to be at Maryland. They like being at Maryland, whether it's the program, whether they like being local, whether they recognize that Maryland believed in them when no one else did. There, it sounds like that stuff has come up, but yeah, I mean, it's just the last week has just really been crazy, and it gives further credence to the camp of people that say college football and college athletics in its current state is dead.
Yeah, it definitely is. And jumping on that, I mean, onto the portal side, and stories that I've heard are just, there is almost always a school out there that is like the grass is greener is the term that's always used. There it's right now it is extremely hard for these athletes to get the amount of money that's floated at them, not necessarily the amount of money that they get, but in the early stages of the amount of money that is floated at them from competition or other schools that are trying to generally piece together a program very quickly. See probably what Auburn and Hugh Freeze are going to attempt to do again in this offseason. Teams that really, really need guys and need to win now, much more out there with their offers. And look, unless you're a huge name at a school, there is generally another school from the SEC, Big 12. I mean, any of these Power Five conferences that are willing to throw more money at you than your current, because, well, let's face it, these guys are between 17 and I guess you almost have to go up to 25 now in terms of age. And coaches are always going to see the downside. You see every aspect of a person that you work with day in, day out. And a lot of times, if someone's willing to throw out some ridiculous number, a lot of people are just going to say, look, we'll hit the portal and find your replacement. There is that aspect of sports is always out there. And it's just, it's driving me away. It's definitely going to make, I think every fan care less when you don't see the same guys, the same big name guys over 4 years. But same thing's true at Kansas State right now with Will Howard. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. It's not only Maryland. Just right now, there's some real downsides of Maryland.
Yeah, I mean the Washington State quarterback Cam Ward, he wasn't even officially in the portal yet, and there was already reports that 10 schools had lined up with reportedly $1 million offers. Now I'll say this: it seems like every freaking transfer has a 6 or 7 figure price tag that comes along with it, and now that NIL is kind of 2 years in, you kind of end up figuring out what some guys are making, and that stuff never ends up materializing, but it does seem crazy that everyone's going in and there's like a six. Everyone's just got just crazy money um, around their name right now.
Yeah, you mentioned Cam Ward, which goes right into the loyalty and the finding a guy, and he put up huge numbers at Incarnate Word prior to. So yeah, there were
Yeah,
definitely some suitors coming out of it, but that's one that sticks out. I mean, Will Howard, who I already mentioned, is another one that like Kansas State made him. He wasn't like a huge recruit going in, and it's the same thing, and just time and time again. But yeah, on the money side of it, from everything that I've heard, those numbers are accurate for a few players. There are definitely guys that garner that amount of money, especially at the quarterback position and the offensive line, where Maryland's going to have to fight that battle is right up there in terms of price tag. And then there's the rest of it. Every one of these teams has to field 85 scholarship players, 105-man rosters. There just isn't, if you look at the grand scheme of things, even what, former scholarship funds are bringing in at the biggest schools, there is not just factually enough loose cash out there to fund this stuff. So take the
yeah,
numbers with a grain of salt, other than when the guys, are big name guys and of course quarterbacks. But, Matt Rule's comments, again, they're looking for a big time quarterback. So that 1.5 to 2 million is definitely more accurate than not. But if it was open and you had to file, like NFL free agents, I would really be interested to see what Barham, what Deitchus, what they're able to pull, especially a guy like Deitchus, because there's only 1 year there.
yeah, I could see it. I could see a guy like Digest. I mean, I think I initially, I mean, I could see him going SEC in the end. I mean, at the end of the day, once you go into the portal, things can change and they can change very fast. So I kind of figured, an SEC school, he could be a fit there. But yeah, I think just kind of what he's shown just in the passing game. When you think of just kind of translating that to the Big 12, seems like a good fit. So I could see him kind of really thriving, kind of genuinely commanding, at a low 6 figure, but probably a 6 figure NIL deal at the right school. And then Barham, again, I think that he's another guy where he has one more year. So maybe he kind of tailed off that second half of the 2023 season, but another guy where you just kind of look at him and just kind of look at the way he kind of carries himself uh, every day in terms of practice and football workouts, things like that. I could kind of see him probably commanding a little bit more than Digest. The
So
rumor is
on
more than Digest, so we'll
Yeah,
see.
on the 2023 note, the Terps they find their bowl announcement out today. Last minute switch. Everybody had the Las Vegas Bowl. Terps land in Nashville in the Music City Bowl, and they take on Auburn.
Yeah, I was very happy. Obviously, Las Vegas, I thought was going to be a good bowl. Obviously, it seemed like the last 2 3 weeks, Vegas, Phoenix, those were kind of the main two, and Vegas was obviously the preference. Obviously, like we talked about last couple shows, but just in terms of prestige and payout, in terms of ladder board, that's just a little bit higher. But so obviously, with results coming out of Conference Championship weekend, Alabama sneaking in, that kind of created a lot of that shakeup, obviously, and largely talked about it, and we touched on it a couple shows ago. But just kind of Maryland's able to market behind Talia with what the offense has done. Maryland has some juice in that regard, and obviously, again, Maryland has. Obviously, not in the same regard as maybe some of these big time schools like the SEC schools or whatnot, but Maryland fans have traveled well over the last 2 years. So I think all of those things kind of set the stage up for I think a good winnable matchup in Nashville. But more importantly, a heck of a place to just go enjoy a game, but before, during, and after.
Yeah, and maybe stick around Nashville New Year's Eve. The day following, Terps will play on the 30th at 2 o'clock. A lot of time left to talk about that matchup, but really a transitional year for Auburn. They land in a bowl, of course, that Iron Bowl game they almost pull off, but a very, very up and down season for the Terps opponents. And who knows what either roster is going to look like with the portal officially opening tomorrow.
Yeah, obviously, Mike Locksley, he touched on it in his bowl Zoom press conference that he'll be able to kind of determine which guys are staying or excuse me which guys are going to be available for the bowl game, things like that. Obviously, he touched on in the past. The bowl game is always going to be a preview of the 2024 season, but guys like Talia Tagovailoa, he's already said that he'll play. Bo Brady, he's expected to play. Jashawn Jones, he's expected to play. Tarheeb Still's probably a guy, and I think Ruben Hippolyte announcing his number switch to 4 in the bowl game is probably pretty indicative of Tarheeb Still's availability for that December 30th matchup. So that'll be something interesting to see, especially with cornerback and off priority this offseason. But nonetheless, I do expect the vast majority of the roster that didn't hit the portal within the next couple days to eventually suit up.
Yeah, Ahmed, anything else on football? A lot of time before the 30th to talk about the bowl.
Yeah, like you said, we're going to dive in. We already have some stuff in the works, just diving in to how really Maryland matches up both against Auburn's offense, both against Auburn's defense as well. So, but again, I think it's just important that I think a lot of fans looked at the USC matchup in Vegas and said, that's a winnable game. Obviously, playing USC, beating USC in a bowl game would be nice, but I think getting a chance to win that third consecutive bowl appearance, do so against an Auburn team. The name will still help, obviously. So I think there's still a lot to like. It just sucks that the timing of Jay Sean's announcement and the bowl announcement dropped within minutes apart, but nonetheless, a good chance for Maryland to officially close the book on the 23 season while giving a preview of what's to come in the spring.
Yeah, certainly is, and another chance to beat a big name opponent, even though it might be a down year. But the Terps could, I really do see them coming out as a favorite, especially if Leah opts in and being able to roll a team that's looked just really, really bad some
Yeah.
points, especially near the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, this Auburn team, I think, has just kind of really struggled. Again, 3 of their 4 losses this season against ranked teams, all 3 of them came within a one-score game. And obviously, like you mentioned, that Auburn, or excuse me, that Alabama Iron Bowl ending, had a chance to pull it out in the end. And before fourth and what was it, 38, 39 there, Jalen Miller. But, again, I think Maryland does stack up well, and it should be an exciting game.
It certainly should. Ahmed, flipping over to basketball, more struggles as the Terps go into Bloomington on Friday night, and many chances to get in the game, get back in the game, but ultimately Maryland's shooting woes, turnover woes, and just overall a lack of being able to make shots get them again.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, it was just Maryland really felt like they didn't have didn't look like they had much of a chance really to start out. We're kind of battling that 10-point deficit midway through the first half, and once Indiana turned on the Jets, Maryland really never was able to turn back. Obviously, was able to cut into the deficit late there to trim it to 12, but again, just really disappointing performance. Again, like we talked about, just with the Asheville tournament, and then the follow up with Villanova. Willard kind of pointed to that 3-game homestand as that time to really get the team and focused and kind of back on track. So I think just having just that entire performance getting dominated yet again on the road. Maryland drops to 2-11 now in road games under Kevin Willard in year 1 and year 2 now. So definitely just concerns, and you're kind of feels like you're just kind of grasping at what kind of sticks out.
Yeah, and look, a couple things from the stat sheet that kind of tell the story. Terps again shoot the ball very poorly, 35.7% on the night, 20 for 56. Maryland 2 for 16 from 3. And here's I think the stat that tells you all you need to know. On Indiana's side, the Hoosiers only attempt 9 threes in the game. They only make 3 of them, but overall, much more solid offense that had a lot more chemistry to it, a lot more ball movement, backscreen cuts, and just overall, look, Indiana, they can't shoot the ball either. They have a lot of their fans right now have a lot of the same complaints as Maryland. They have not been able to bring in any players that can really be impactful on the offensive side of the ball, but they execute a clear system. They have great plays from their big men, and the Terps just seemingly at this point lack any sort of counter sets, knowing the weaknesses that they have coming into the game.
Yeah, and I think obviously another thing is obviously going into it, Indiana, the length in their starting lineup, having three starters that are 6'8" or taller, that was going to be a challenge for Maryland. And I think one thing that stuck out, I mean, obviously Julian Reese was kind of able to do his own, finishing with 14 points there. But, Willard did turn to Caleb Swinton, Roger, Matty Traore a little bit there. Neither were also kind of able to really provide many serviceable minutes. Obviously, Caleb, I believe, picked up two fouls within a minute of game action there. So that was another thing that kind of stuck out. Just Maryland's kind of inability to really slow them down. Caleb Ware was really able to felt like find his shot at ease from beginning to end.
Yeah, I really like Ware as a basketball player. I mean, he sticks out on the court as a guy that really belongs, not necessarily like your classic college 7-foot bruiser, kind of like Swinton Roger is, but really just versatile basketball player on the inside, has the height that just seems almost like a more complete Julian Reese in terms of being able to hit the step back jumper. Obviously, has some height advantage on him, but the Terps, I mean, it seems like year over year at this point, a clear step backwards has been taken. Maryland at this point, a lot of people say they desperately miss Hakeem Hart. Really think Ian Martinez at this point sticks out as the guy that Maryland really could use, just a guard that can get downhill and provide some just extra energy and speed to the offense. But look, the body language, Julian Reese yelling at Dante Scott, not that that doesn't, happen on most teams, but just the great camera work from BTN at that moment. Really not a good look for Maryland. They play a Penn State team that's in also a very very bad spot that just lost to Bucknell at home on Wednesday. But when you can't shoot as a coach, I'm not sure much else to do. They just can't stay in the game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, the shooting, 2 of 16 from 3 point is obviously, it's on par with what we've seen so far through the first couple of games this year, but obviously subpar and not going to be able to win you many games. But, you mentioned, Julian Reese kind of yelling at Dante Scott, and then post game, Kevin Willard really said just about everything except his name, kind of saying Dante Scott needs to play better or else. The problem is, Maryland doesn't really look like they're in a position to turn to the or else. Because what do you do? Do you move Jordan Geronimo to the four? Do you have Jamie Kaiser come in and Noah Bachelor is kind of that guy off the bench, and Dante Scott plays in spurts? I mean, I don't know that Maryland one is capable of doing that, and two, if that's much better of a strategy. So Matt Willard kind of does feels like he has his hand tied, but again, he's responsible for the roster construction. Still feels like yet again, Jameer Young kind of feels like if he isn't able to do it, then what is Maryland able to do? Kind of really feels like he's been able to save the day on multiple occasions for Maryland to kick off this year. Not that we haven't seen that from him last year, but I think when you kind of look at Dante Scott just kind of struggling really. Really, pretty much in every game so far this year, coupled with the poor shooting, coupled with Deshaun Harris Smith, Jamie Kaiser Jr., both those guys you continue to kind of expect them to be impact guys, impact freshmen, and maybe it was a little bit taller of an ask, but so far none of it has kind of lived up to expectations.
Yeah, you'd almost think at some point that, if it's not going to be Scott, if it's not going to be the current lineup construction, and look, he was even more so brutal, I think, on his post game radio spot with Johnny Holiday and Chris Naki on Maryland Sports Radio Network, where he said basically the same thing he said in the press conference, which
Yeah.
both of them were very brief and very blunt in the cases. At what point do you start to entertain just playing a 4 round one with Reese, Geronimo, and Scott as your like three centers down there? I mean, we saw it last year where Dante had to go down low and play. He had to play in the last year of Turgeon in that role. And obviously, part of him coming back is everyone knows he's not an NBA center. He's not really a center at any level of professional basketball. So that wouldn't really succeed, the true reason why he came back to Maryland. But look, the team's got to win. And I don't necessarily know how you can do that when Deshaun Harris Smith isn't giving you anything, when Jamie Kaiser isn't giving you anything. I think Noah Bachelor probably has 1 foot out the door at a minimum at this point,
Yeah.
just given the fact that he went from starting games to playing 1 minute in a blowout loss. But you got to start looking. Willard talked about all those lineup combos that he had on media day. So you got to start looking down the list and figuring out what you can do.
Yeah, and I mean, again, Maryland again has a chance to bounce back against Penn State on Wednesday, but Part of the problem is again, can how successful can Maryland be winning away from Xfinity? Because at this point, uh, there's definitely some juice behind this being a Willard problem right now. I mean, obviously, you look back at it. I believe the record is 6 of 6. Excuse me, 6-16 in games outside of Xfinity right now. 2-11 in true road games. So it's a concern. So I mean, again, Maryland can get back in the win column. They can stack it. But how successful is Maryland really going to be? You look at the preseason expectations, obviously right outside the top 25, and you look at the NCAA tournament. I think that the way that they're playing, the longer this goes, that continues to become a distant theory. But again, I think just Maryland's inability to really put two consistent performances together is quite appalling at this point.
It is, and right now with the way the league is looking, you probably have to win 12 at a minimum to get in. I think 11 gets you on the bubble. 11 wins in conference. I think
Yeah,
12 or 13 is probably your number you need to come up with, meaning that basically every game at home becomes a must win. Other than that Purdue game, which you're going to need a signature win, and the only way you're getting that's against really the best team in the conference, who also just dropped their opener at Northwestern this weekend. So you got to win. You got to find a way to win on the road, because those that can get you like a quad three win, turn it into a quad two, turn a quad two into a quad one, just given the road factor that's factored into that. But there's not much really optimism out there, because the teams that seem to be able to break through are the ones that can shoot. That seems to be the thing that can bail you out, and that's the exact opposite of what Maryland has. And the defense is not looking much better at times.
yeah, and again, we're coming off what was it, 2-3 games ago when Maryland saw 4 players score against Indiana. You saw 5 different players score. So again, it's some issues that are kind of becoming repetitive that are kind of concerning. But Willard has repeatedly said this team is going to start slow. They could probably a little bit slower than we expected, but see if they can kind of maybe turn the corner come Jan 1. But right now it's looking pretty bleak.
Yeah, well, you would hope they can figure some things out starting Wednesday, pick up a Big Ten win. Obviously, then it's two more games that should go in the win column at home before that trip out to Los Angeles to take on UCLA on the 22nd. Ahmed, anything else to add here on the pod?
Yeah, we should uh, do a little inside the bag segment. I think we got some names to know there.
All right, let's hear them. Terps hot on the trail, coaches out, portal targets stacking up, and Maryland looking to add to that offensive line.
Yeah, obviously, first portal target that kind of emerged there, Josh Katlenberger, former Purdue lineman. Maryland picked up the offer, or excuse me, Katlenberger picked up the offer over the weekend. The staff got a chance to connect with him, and seems like he's with center. That's going to be the kind of position to know. Obviously, Mike Purcell, Eric Harris, both those guys are exhausting their eligibility. So finding guys, obviously, you have Tamaris Walker, Chris Love, both those guys who have played or rotated in briefly. I think it was both just a Towson game, but finding a starting center is kind of the focus there. And then Kellenberger fits that mold. Pretty unique though. You don't really see too often. I think it's 7 starts, 4 at center, 3 or 2 at right tackle. Again, not exactly something that you see every day. Usually, it's an interior lineman. He kind of sticks inside, but that's kind of the main portal target right now. Obviously, quarterback. That's going to be or excuse me, a position to focus on. Touched on a couple of names over on Inside the Black and Gold for subscribers, and then a couple high school names to keep an eye on. Obviously, Braden Lee, Jeremiah Marcellin, both of those guys. Prime flip targets. Marcellin has already obviously taken his official there. I'd say Maryland is probably in a good spot with both of those guys. Have them firmly as warm right now, but Logan Bennett, St. Francis, interior offensive lineman. He's a name to know, and he will be coming up on his official visit this weekend.
Yeah, Terps hitting the trail as coaches also look to lock down Maryland. Feeling any concerns towards flips of their current class committed?
I mean, I think Makai White. I think that's kind of one name that a lot of people have kind of been questioning. Obviously, right now, Virginia Tech and Michigan have kind of been mentioned with him. It sounds like both of those have faded. Virginia, I mentioned a couple of times for subscribers. They've been pushing really hard. Arkansas has kind of been lurking as well, but seems like there's a level of confidence with him right now. Post a little bit more on his status, and then Larry Tarver Jr., cornerback out of Norland down in Florida. He's another to kind of keep an eye on down the stretch. But as Maryland tries to hold on to Tarver there, another in the secondary to know is Cam Dooley, 3-star safety out of Valley and down in Alabama. Maryland's kind of been on him shortly before he backed off his commitment to Missouri earlier in the fall. And Wisconsin, Kentucky have both been mentioned with him as well. So he's been in the mix for an official visit. He told me again this weekend, still nothing set there. So we'll see what materializes. But finding another safety obviously is another focus coming down the stretch.
Definitely is. And Ahmed, of course, always following the Terps in the portal and on the recruiting trail over and inside the blackandgold.net for VIP subscribers. Ahmed, a lot to go with Terps football, a lot more inside the bag here over the next couple of weeks as Maryland continues. Well, I guess we'll cover, I was going to say add from the portal, but whatever goes on with the portal, we'll have that here for you on the podcast as well as the early signing period coming up. I'll ask you again, anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think last bit. Obviously, I think wanted to touch on this. Jordan Seaton. I think that's the big guy that everyone was kind of looking at this cycle. 5-star tackle. Maryland made the top 7 for him. It's been rumored for quite some time now. Sounded like that December 15th weekend was going to be his official visit weekend, but sounds like holding pattern right now. Nothing's officially finalized still. Nothing's on the books just yet. He made a last minute change, took an official visit to Ohio State this past weekend. So we'll see what kind of shakes out. Oregon, Tennessee has been pushing very, very hard for him. Alabama was heavily in the mix for him earlier in the fall. They're still continuing to be in the mix, and you can't ever discount the Tide. Colorado was a school that was hot for him, but don't really view the Buffs as a major contender down the stretch. But so we'll see what happens. Loxley has been working on this one for quite some time. I think this was kind of been the crown jewel of this class. You kind of look back at Seaton. Maryland was that first Power 5 offer when he was a freshman, and everyone locally knew that he was going to be the guy. So this is not just a recent pursuit. This is the end of a 4-year pursuit for Maryland. So should like you said, Mason, stay locked inside the black and gold. We'll have all your coverage for recruiting and much more. So be sure to stay locked in.
Yeah, make sure to like this podcast wherever you listen to it, subscribe to it wherever you can. And as always, for Ahmed Gafir and Mason Viner, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.